Anyway, wherever you're catching us from, please feel free to let us know in the chats. Could be in Lagos, you could be in Nairobi, could be in Kinshasa, like I mentioned, or somewhere in Europe. It's always a privilege to have you here. We are very glad to be hosting you tonight. My name is Amatinu Samuel Frank, and I'm policy analyst at the AI Skills and Compute Africa Institute. And tonight, well, I get the easy job. I get to ask three very important professionals, much better than I am currently in this field, to share with us some great insights. And well, here we are. Every regulator, we see people like trying to handle the conversations around data protection and governance. And I guess it's beautiful because every serious business currently now has a privacy policy somewhere. And well, I have sometimes personally have conversations with CEOs who are still trying to understand how is it possible to set up like a privacy office. So the question we are trying to answer today is if we actually have a privacy office that works, if we can come up with a privacy office that works. And well, usually the answer is a long pause, and that gap is what we are trying to close, or we are trying to address tonight, not just in theory but also in practice. So I think it's time we hop into what is bringing us currently. um Tonight we have Tolu Akerele. She's the global DPO at Paystack, and no need for introductions. She's done this work actually in Lagos, London, Paris, Tel Aviv, Dubai. Tolu, you're most welcome. We also have Harrison Chisonga, currently out of Kinshasa, Equity BCDC, and before that, he's one of the main persons that was actually in charge of building the privacy office at Standard Bank Malawi. The same week the act passed. So Harrison, we are really glad to have you here. And we also have in the room Jan Olwana, Group DPO at Rome and Pulse Africa, running this work across 5 countries at once. Jan, it's a huge pleasure to have you here. So, quick one before we get into the main conversations we are supposed to have. I'd just like to mention that the Global Africa Network is the home for practitioners who want to do privacy seriously and much more in the practical angle of conversations. So, if you're not yet subscribed, or if you're not yet involved into conversation with the Global Africa Network, try to stick around, because tonight as well we are going to discuss foundations, we are going to discuss operations, we are going to discuss leadership realities, and we are going to have back to backs. And feel free to share your questions actually in the chat that is ongoing. Feel free, if you have something to say, if you have a comment you feel is very much important to mention, we will be always happy to address. So all right, I think it's time for us to get in. Well, let's maybe begin where most organizations get stuck. Let's say somebody, for example, a CEO, a board, or a regulator wakes up tomorrow and says, "We need a privacy office." Well, I want this question to sometimes forget about the templates or the different policies you can download off the internet. What is the first actual move? What do you think is the first actual move? Where do you put the shovel in the ground? Like, and I think I'll give the mic to Harrison to come in first, because Harrison, you literally lived this in Malawi like the same week the act passed. So probably it's going to be very interesting to hear from you on that specific angle.
Yeah, thanks, Samuel. I hope I'm audible enough.
Perfectly.
Oh, great stuff. Yeah, so thank you so much, and thanks to the team for inviting me once again, and to share this practical kind of experience. And as you've put it, I actually stepped out of a Standard Bank as a DPO, and recently moved to DRC to take a role there at Equity PCDC. But I was chatting to my colleague earlier on when we were preparing about this to say this is quite a live and practical topic that we are talking about. And there are a lot of things maybe that we leave out when we are making our notes to come to a panel like this, but this will be uh, streaming out of me as someone who has just, completed a similar kind of a task. So um, one thing that was very clear to me was the fact that I was working in a highly regulated environment, which is a bank, a financial sector. And, when it comes to regulation and finance or finance sector, most of the organizations, they have a zero tolerance on compliance issues. And that quickly put us into gear five because the regulation in Malawi had just come out in 2024. That's when the law was passed, and then the journey to compliance was really in sprint mode already, and not a marathon as others have enjoyed before. So when you talk about building uh, a high impact office, there are three things that really came to my mind. And this is really out of experience and what I went through. And over time, I started to kind of appreciate these things. The first thing was really to define the mandate. And it became very clear later on, as much as I was just doing it on the journey to compliance, the mandate topic became very critical. And answering why was the driver to how we kind of looked at the definition of the mandate itself. Because as I've mentioned, working in a financial industry meant regulation. And do we still want to answer the regulation question when we are also talking about building the data privacy office? The second thing was to understand the landscape, the data landscape itself, and really looking at the risk profile. Um, who are we dealing with? What personal data are we collecting? Um, how do we safeguard this data? Which regulations do we apply? Much as the Data Protection Act as a regulation becomes paramount to addressing the compliance and other things perhaps that we are going to talk about later on. Um, Looking at this journey from this angle of understanding the landscape and really just looking at which risks we are addressing. So, firstly, you look at the mandate, the why, and secondly, you look at the landscape and the risk profile that you're dealing with. So these were really the two main areas that I focused on during that journey. But also accountability became such a big thing, because if you do not get the support from the sponsors, if you don't define the data owners, the data privacy champions across the organization, it becomes difficult for one person as a DPO to run across and ensuring that you have a good footing as a foundation when you are building a proper kind of data privacy office. I think for now I'll stop there, just to also perhaps give my colleagues something to add to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Harrison. I think what you just mentioned is actually very important. the link between the highly regulated sector in which you were operating, but also the mandate, which I think are some of the conversations who are most often disregarded. I think I'm going to immediately invite Tolu, if possible. Tolu can introduce herself, maybe, and like, Tolu, please, in your answer, do not be restricted to the scope of your current work. If you could give us like general overview of like your huge background and experiences, it's actually going to be amazing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Tolu. I'm the Global Data Protection Officer at Paystack, ISMS Manager, but also CEO of TAS Cyber Solutions Limited, which is a data protection compliance organization in Nigeria. So, based on my role as a DPCO and as DPO in-house, I would say there are a lot of common issues that people tend to not think about when they start a privacy program. You can be documentation heavy, but I would take a step back and actually look at what is already on ground. What are the policies that exist? What are the gaps? What are the things that look like a privacy program, but what actually makes up that privacy program? So I'll give you an easy example. You have a privacy policy on the website. Does it actually reflect what's going on? And then if I take it a step back, how can you match that without knowing what's going on ground? So I would say, first of all, understand what the gaps are by understanding what the company is doing. What are the processes? What is the data that the company is collecting, storing, sharing? Who are they sharing it with? So by doing this step by step, you're actually creating data maps, is the more technical term. So you're looking at from collection to storage to disposal, even to analysis. If you're in the fintech space, you'll look at maybe, are we doing KYC verification? What tool are we using for that verification? So these are all different processes and processing activities. But within those processes, you want to also look at the assets. By understanding what assets or tools are storing the data, you can then start working your way towards, okay, what team is responsible for this tool? Who's the DRI, directly responsible individual here? That will then help you later on when you need to look at retention and create, again, the policy side of that, which is your retention schedule. So first, just understanding the lay of the land, so to speak, understanding what is the company data, what are your crown jewels, how are you using them, for what purpose? And by even just understanding these things, you've already now built a first level ROPA, record of processing activities. And I think in doing that, that's where you see where the gaps are. Because if nobody can tell you why they're storing this or why they're collecting it, then you've already identified an issue. So I would say starting with what's on ground, what's the existing structure, and then picking at that by also marrying that with, okay, what are we trying to achieve as a company with this data? So you're already building your first level of data maps. And as you build that data map, and by de facto your ROPA, you're also creating a data asset inventory. And that inventory is just, again, it can be something as simple as an Excel sheet. This is the data we're collecting. This is why we're collecting it. This is where it's stored. And then you can say, okay, how long are we keeping it for? We don't know. Put a question mark there. Come back to it later. So you're already fleshing out different starting points. And I would say really also stress testing or pulse checking. How do people respond to these questions? Do people even understand you when you're talking about retention? Then you can table that and say, okay, for our first awareness and training, we will have data retention and deletion as a topic, but also ease yourself in. So understand what are the biggest red flags or warning symbols and signs, and then you can start chipping away at it bit by bit. But just, I would say, first and foremost, as someone who has built privacy programs from scratch, when there's nothing on ground, don't kick down the door and say, we need a ROPA, we need a this, because people are going to be like, what's a ROPA? And I can tell you, it doesn't matter how advanced your privacy program is, there will always be one person who will still ask you 5 years later, despite however many trainings you've done, they'll say, what is personal data again? So you can't assume that even if you beat a dead horse and tell them a million times what personal data is, if you're dealing with engineers, if you're dealing with people who literally their language is code, personal data and data protection is not top of mind. So you have to make it accessible. To make it accessible, you have to know what they know and what they don't know, and understand again, what is the company trying to achieve with all this data? And sometimes they don't even know, they collect it just in case. So again, if you see a just in case, don't throw words like data minimization and privacy by design and DPA for data processing agreement. You have to speak the language that people understand and say, okay, well, we're sharing data with this person or this third party. Do we have any agreements in place? Do we have any NDAs? You look at the NDA, oh, we're sharing personal data. So actually, we may need to loop in legal to draw up a data processing agreement, because we're sharing data from us internally to a third party. And law, unfortunately, says that we have to have an agreement for that. And that's how you start building in compliance and exercising that muscle, because I think a large part of building a privacy office starts with people understanding what you're talking about. So NDAs, people understand. So you just say, okay, it's an NDA, but for personal data. And I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tolu. One thing at least that I was able to understand perfectly from your conversation is a step-by-step approach, which you actually mainly recommend currently. And a step-by-step approach is very broad to an extent. It's an error that I see a lot of people actually, dealing with most of the time, is they think it's just personal data. But I think an element that you just mentioned around direct responsibility individual is very much linked to the concept of non-personal data as well, which is actually a huge thing to take up. Well, I'm going to invite Yan without any much more time. Yan, I think you're not focused like maybe as compared to Harrison and Tolu, who are like involved into the financial industry. I would probably like to have your perspective much more from the media space, if possible. Like you've also been around conversations on the African continent when it comes to what should actually be the first move. Please, can you give us like your perspective?
Hi, I'm Ian Olwana, the Group Data Protection Officer for Roman Pulse. So part of half of it is recruitment, the other half is media. I think just to add to what Tulu has said, because my first step would actually be a gap assessment. The only thing I will add to what he's mentioned is now the aspect of the organizational structure, because it brings out the aspect of executive sponsorship and more of a stakeholder buy into the whole idea. Now, one of the things I noticed over time is reporting structure of any DPO in an organization matters, because it shows the level of seriousness that any organization has towards the department. Sometimes you find the organization puts DPOs as a part-time role. Maybe a full-time role is IT or legal. Then DPO is thrown side, like a side gig in the organization. It already shows you the level of seriousness that the organization takes. And the other thing is, if it's a standalone role, then what is your reporting structure, and how reporting things like reporting frequency, and basically how fast the like the person you're reporting to what extent can they implement or make changes in the organization. So I think part of the gap assessment, or part of the assessment that I'll try to understand, is the seriousness that the organization has towards the role, and is it something that can be adjusted? Was it a deliberate deliberate procedure, or was it like a mistake? More of I have realized actually there are several organizations that do not understand the impact of a DPO. So they'll you'll find them throwing it under legal or under another department, which complicates it, because it basically it's like a balance between the technical side and the legal side. So ideally, you have to translate the two sides. So if it's buried under a different department and made really small, then clearly something has to be addressed there. Because ideally, in a good situation, a good DPO is meant to report directly to the highest level of the organization. For instance, in Kenya, one of the things that are clear in the law is a DPO is independent. Is like a the in between the ODPC and the organization. So their role is independent of the organization's agenda. So those are I'll say that is one of the critical things I will add to what Tulu has said regarding the first thing I would want to do in an organization as you're setting up the privacy function.
Thank you very much, Jan. Well, I would suggest that most of what you actually emphasize on is very much related to a concept Tolu came up with as well, the direct responsibility individual. Well, from this first round of questions, if there is one thing that is very clear, at least, is that depending on the sector in which you are, there is need for a proper gap assessment, but also there is need for a proper understanding of the data one is supposed to deal with. And I think it directly leads me to the conversation around some of the mistakes that some people actually do in this field, because I build from the fact that all of the three of you people currently here have probably walked in rooms where someone was somewhere somehow trying to deal with conversations around data in his or her specific environment, and so it was broken. So I am curious about the stories. Like, what are the mistakes that you have seen again and again when organizations, try to keep building most of the privacy foundations? And I think I would start with Tolu maybe on this one, because it's probably going to be interesting to hear from different places where she's actually been doing this.
Um, yeah, thanks. I can say one that I made, a big one, and some that I see a lot, which I think was touched on by Harrison. One that I made when I joined Paystack and I was coming from a big four was bringing my corporate energy into a startup, a tech company. So I saw things and I was like, absolutely not. Stop doing that. You can't do this. And tech bros are very sensitive. They love to build. So the worst thing you can do is tell them no. And the second worst thing you can do is tell them that they can't launch this product because it's not compliant, because there is this reputation that compliance is a blocker. We literally have t-shirts, the legal team does, that says legal is not a blocker, because that's the rep that you get, right? I'm not in the legal team, but if they have that rep, I have a worse one. So I think you need to really, like I said before, speak the language, but you also need to understand what are the company priorities. And I think this is very often overlooked. If you understand the company priorities, you can see how privacy fits into that and you can make it fit. If they need to launch something by the end of Q1, you can't come and say, no, we can't launch. That's not an option. So you have to figure out how to creatively insert yourself early enough that you're identifying any potential blockers, and then you phase those blockers. And again, this is just in the product space, of course, in tech. You phase those blockers into, okay, what is a deal breaker? What is you can launch, but then we have to fix this within X period of time. And then what I see from as a consultant from startups, big companies, this was mentioned by both of my co-panelists, was people don't take privacy seriously. And I think that's a big overlook, because people will maybe engage a DPCO or engage consultants or hire someone. But if you don't have that leadership buy-in and they don't understand the importance of what you're doing, then it's a fail. And I see a lot with my clients, they try and engage me to just come and do things, and they're not involved, and they'll pay the money and it doesn't matter. But actually, they need to be involved. They need to understand. So you have to be able to engage with leadership, C-suite, key decision makers, and make them understand the importance of compliance, and not compliance as a tick box, because that's not going to get you anywhere, but compliance as a muscle that you start to exercise. And honestly, if you have to be a bit of a chameleon and adapt. And again, that's where understanding the company priorities lie, because you then have to find a way to marry that priority and make them realize that it's not as daunting as it seems. It can be as easy as you make it or as difficult as you make. And it's actually harder if you have no understanding or visibility into what privacy is doing or why privacy is doing what they're doing. Because you can fix something once, but if you don't have someone who's constantly looking at these things and speaking with the decision makers, then the decision makers can make decisions, and what you patched or built into compliance with, it's not going along with the decisions that are being made. So I would say that is one thing that really is overlooked, the importance of the role and having that buy-in. And if you're stuck with a small budget, it doesn't matter. You don't have to spend millions or thousands. You just have to actually have that intentionality, and then you can run and build and do whatever you want to do. And I think it's really important that data protection officers start changing the narrative and not saying, okay, well, under this law and this, I'm not a lawyer. So anyone who cites laws to me, I'm just a bit like, okay, but when are they enforcing the law? Like, you have to be able to give and take a bit and not just come so clinical and ABCD, but actually it's 8.2. So you have a way of being that chameleon and speaking a language in which leadership is not automatically going to shut the door or think this doesn't concern me, or this is why I've hired you, I don't have to think about this. Speak to them in a way that they're interested and they're like, okay, you did that, cool, that sounds good to me. And you're actually getting their buy-in in a way that they don't even realize you're getting it from them. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much, Toru. And perhaps before going to Harrison, I think it would be interesting maybe that you tell us, for example, a very practical resistance that you met. I feel like what you're actually saying is very much consistent with what the kind of energies that we actually listen to most of the time when we have a lawyer that is transitioning from being a lawyer to being a data protection. I think on the African continent, it's very recurrent. You see a lot of lawyers becoming DPOs, and most of the time there is that clash. Well, it would be interesting maybe on the next run to maybe tell us a little bit much more on a kind of practical resistance that you kind of experience. I think I'd be curious enough to listen to what it looked like much more on general. Well, please, Harrison, over to you. It would be interesting to know exactly what you think somewhere somehow is a mistake that most of the people actually do in this industry. Hey, Harrison, can you hear us?
You're on mute still.
Okay, while we wait for Harrison to come back, I think Yan, you can go on.
Okay, so I'll just go straight to an example that I faced. One of the biggest mistakes I ever did was to assume that markets are the same. And I'll talk about a very interesting market. I was trying to set up in Rwanda. And if you dealt with the Rwandan Data Protection Authority, then you have a story to tell. They'll make you basically they'll make you understand their law thoroughly. Which brings me back to my point. There is a general assumption that every African data protection law is a direct duplicate of the GDPR. So we tend to bring European structures, European setups, and we want to just dump them in any African country and assume that they will work really well, and we can just march on to the next market, drop it again. So it's important that as an organization to understand, or as a DPO setting up in a new organization, it's important to understand the uniqueness of the organization, the country, and figure out the exact basically the exact point where you're supposed to come in, and how you can actually help them comply. Because after much back and forth with the Rwanda issue, I realized the communication was the problem. We were doing everything the right way, but we are not communicating our systems properly to them. When all is said and done, it's important that you understand exactly the environment that you are in, the kind of need or the gap that you are meant to fill in, and custom make a solution that can actually fit the organization that you're actually coming to support. So I think that will be my take for that.
Thank you very much, Jan. Two key words that I think are very important from what you mentioned actually are the differences in market, but also the environmental challenges that come with that specific market. I think it's very important that we actually pay attention to most of these terms, because very similar to an issue that actually Tolu was mentioning around the corporate energy bringing in most of the time. I think it's a very similar conversation around markets and the different challenges. Well, Harrison, I hope you're back. I hope you can hear us better. Just to give you a little bit of background, we are discussing some of the common mistakes, and over to you.
Right. Thanks. Sorry about the bad network. But one thing that I kind of came across was really giving the whole kind of I can put it like ownership of the data privacy role into one person or one department. When I was initially looking at the journey to compliance itself, and after carrying out the gap analysis, I also did identify the relevant people that are going to carry out specific tasks along the journey. And I had to make sure that this is well known in advance so that I get the necessary support. And if you miss this, like really when you're building the team or when you're building the compliance aspect of it, if you miss it from the beginning, it becomes very hard to correct it later. So what I did, like in my case, was to look at all the technical aspects that were being mentioned in the Act, and look at the relevant people that are going to help me as the DPO to ensure that the journey should not be a heavy burden on me as an individual or as a department. Because fortunately, in my case, the data protection office was sitting in the data office. I don't know if it was just the data notion and then everything just had to come to the data office. But in identifying who has to help me in running this, I looked at the legal aspect of the things. I looked at the technical aspect of the things, where the security guys had to come in, the IT people had to come in, the procurement people had to come in, looking at the third-party relationships that we have, and bring everyone together into a kind of a working group. And that really eased the whole journey. Because remember, as I mentioned earlier, now a new law has come in, and we have to, quickly comply. And looking at the moving pieces along, it became very clear that this role can't be tasked to one person or just one department. So one of the common mistakes, because now I started helping even other organizations in setting up their offices, this is one thing that I quickly picked up, and I made sure that it has to be well known, even to the leadership, to say this is not a one-man show. The other common one was delaying privacy up to the end. You wait for an audit, and then audit picks it up. Then the whole story changes, because now it's an audit finding, and deadlines, making sure that things are in place, and it just messes up everything else. So having data privacy as early as possible. We always talk about privacy by design, making sure that in all your designs, in all your processes, you have privacy at the back of your mind, and ensuring that it's clear enough to say this is not just a compliance issue, but we are also making sure that this journey becomes clearer even later on, when you are looking at things like trust, ensuring that there is value coming out of it, and having that onset mentality of making sure that privacy really comes at the beginning and not at the end. So those were the kind of the early ones that I quickly picked up, and I ensured that everyone should be clear that these could be real issues down the line. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Harrison. I think you you actually said it all. And I think mainly on the African continent, and I know a lot of academicians are probably going to disagree because they are going to try to join Ian on the conversation on the Brussels effect. He just recently pointed to us trying to internalize the GDPR in most of our activities. I think it's very recurrent, but actually getting the relevant support from different institutions or from different bodies is actually a common mistake that you're going to see people not agreeing for, not going to look for it. I think it's a mistake we need to deconstruct. We need to go and look for adequate help in different offices. Well, we have a question in the chat that I think would be interesting to take from Kamoru Emmanuel Umuru. How can privacy offices in African organizations build influence when budget, talent, and executive attention are heavily prioritized towards cybersecurity and revenue generation? Well, I think this is a very interesting question. Does any of the panelists want to react first?
Yeah, I think honestly, this isn't a bad problem to have, because if they're actually budgeting towards cybersecurity, I think that's more than what a lot of organizations are doing. So what you should actually do is try and get a loophole into cybersecurity and then branch out from there. So if you can try and maybe not combine offices, but try and share some of that budget. So if there's a big push towards cybersecurity, maybe there are ISO standards that are being certified. Try and add the privacy ISO standard, the ISO 27701, or try and see if you can align certain data protection standards and frameworks to security, because data protection is really implemented from the technical side through information security, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a subsect of information security. So you can already try and liaise with that team and see if you can, lean on their budget and their influence, and then do joint trainings, joint activities together. So then you can actually Sorry, I've just seen that Cheyenne. Also, now the PIM standard is a standalone, the Privacy Information Management System. So that there are ways you can collaborate, and this was something that I wanted to mention: cross-functional collaboration and identifying your stakeholders. If you, again, if you're a lawyer, you actually have, it's easier for you to make that jump because you can say, oh, I don't know enough about the security side of things. Can I shadow you? Can you mentor me? And then you say, oh, well, there are these certifications that I'd like to go for. And then, I don't know, position yourself in a way that you can either use your legal background as a way of saying that that's a knowledge gap for you and you'd like to understand more about the security side, and then you can see if you can get buy-in for budget from data protection, because obviously you don't need security certifications, you will need privacy budget and things like that. If you're like me and you came from an information security background and cybersecurity background, then again, that's also low-hanging fruit, because then you can work on joint initiatives with them. So when you're talking about things like access control, role-based access control, it's easier to kind of have those discussions, set up standing sinks between security and privacy, have a security privacy GRC team where you meet every week, and then, liaise with the CISO or whoever is your information security officer, and make sure that you collaborate with them if you have that security background. That's another way of positioning yourself to get talent. And you can even probably share from the same talent pool and have maybe somebody you can make a case for a PriveSec GRC personnel, and then you've kind of integrated yourself into that budget. Those are just some ideas off the top of my head.
Thank you very much, Tolu. Anyone wanted to jump off that question as well, maybe before we proceed?
Yeah, I'll just have to add something. Maybe personal experience. One, you can't fight revenue generation, and I can also maybe add this. It's hard to compare compliance to revenue generation. It's a fight you'll always lose. Any business is out there to make money, so will always come after. So if, as Tulu has mentioned, if cybersecurity has a budget, then you are I'll say you are almost safe, depending on how your collaboration skills are. One of the things that I did when I started was to, anyway, the cybersecurity team were close to me, so what I did is I showed them value. Value in this case is, they had a budget, but they didn't have the, how can I put it, like the enforcement mechanism. Now, the beauty about data protection is it's a legal instrument. So that means it has the backing of the law. Meaning, if the organization messes up, it's not a loss. It's reputation, it's trust. You're on the radar with the government, all those things. So what I did is I came in to collaborate with the IT by showing them that if we combine initiatives, then you can have the enforcement mechanism for all the things that you're trying to do. Anyway, information security, it's hard to separate from data protection, because most organizations, somehow, somewhere, the information is personal data. So we are sort of like implementing as a single team, but we have separate initiatives. So that one project, when the project is done, everyone is having their own objectives covered. So I'll say that is an easier way of handling this. Then you can build on that as you try to figure out or to show value for your initiatives, so that you can get a budget. But I would say if cybersecurity has a budget, you're safe.
Thank you very much, Ian. I think there is actually a huge connection with what Tolu was actually mentioning, which I think it's very much circling around leveraging the ecosystem in which you are, or trying as much as you can to see which department or where the budget can actually be squeezed from. And I think it's a good strategy to apply, but still it leads me actually to the next question that I wanted to discuss, because we realize continuously that most organizations on the African continent, be it in the public or the private sector, they have like one person, sometimes half a person, sometimes actually the head of the legal team, like, who is like abandoned to himself to handle everything that is around data protection. So I'm just thinking, for a small or a growing organization with like limited budget, just like Cameron mentioned, what does a minimum viable privacy office, like, on a very much practical point of view, like, a privacy office actually looks like, for mainly for an organization that is actually trying to scale, that is scaling at an increasing speed. I don't know. I think we are going to go with Harrison this time around.
There,
Hello, Harrison? We can hear you. Can
yeah,
you hear? Okay.
you can hear me. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So, looking at the minimum viable kind of a privacy office, I think first things first, you need proper backing from a sponsor within the organization, however small it is. Um, it's not everything that needs monetary support, but even just having a leader to talk down about privacy, how important it is, how they understand, how the company actually values privacy from the onset. That will save a lot of work. And much as you're looking at a minimal viable kind of a office, you also need to unpack the privacy into the daily or kind of routine operations of that company, so that it should not look like you're breaking things or you are introducing new things into the organization. So as small as it might be, there could be certain things that now you just tweak them into mandatory, how we collect certain fields, so that it should not really move far away from the norm of how things are done, and start with like a package, a data governance or data framework kind of a package, which will not take much of the effort, because now you're looking at something to get you by. So things like a privacy policy, DPIA templates, um, certain incidents management, incidents or breach management. So start with the governance kind of a package, not too heavy, not too much. You don't have to start with like a 30-page kind of a policy document, but just to bring that visibility into the organization and ensuring that everyone appreciates this data privacy. And as you've mentioned, it's now becoming regulatory. It's a law in most of the African nations today. Therefore, it's by default, but we don't have to make it so hard on people that they have to now start looking at this new animal and try to start looking on the side. The third thing would be to look at appointing, whether it could be someone external or internally, someone who is going to lead this journey. I think those three key areas would mean something minimal to keep you going, and then you can start building on that as you go. I think that's what would be my take.
Thank you very much, Harrison. Yan, would you like to jump in before Tolu?
Yeah, I'll just mention two things on this. One is a culture. It's important. Harrison has mentioned culture of privacy, which I'll translate it to the principle of privacy by design and default. I would say if an organization is small and resources are limited, you want to be more proactive and make sure that each employee and from the word go they understand how to embed privacy That way, it will save you so much in future, covering or basically remediating the issues that will come up. And so a privacy, focusing on a privacy culture is very critical. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is automate as much as you can, but only where it's necessary. I'll give an example. If it's a digital product or maybe a website, you want to leverage on the external tools to help you manage consent, manage data subject access rights, and such things. That way, it will basically it will reduce the burden on you or the risk on you to manage the privacy program.
Thank you very much. This is very important. Well, Tolu, it's your turn.
I think they've said it excellently. I wouldn't really. I just plus one, especially doubling down on the privacy culture. I think that's really important. And then also just to expand on what Harrison said about the privacy program or framework. I think just making sure we started with what are the gaps, what are the things you want to look at, and then you build on it. I think actually having that in a checklist, so to speak, so okay, governance, where are we on this? If you're looking at data lifecycle, just have your headings, make sure you're covering the key components of a privacy program. So I can name what typically I would start with: governance, looking at that, which would also cross into data governance, data lifecycle management. So that's from collection, storage, disposal, like I said, retention, information security. So again, for that person who asked that question, that's in that specific third pillar of your framework, you can tag team with the security team or cybersecurity. Incident response, again, another vector for tag teaming with security. Privacy by design and default, like we've heard. Third party risk management, and this is something that a lot of data protection officers don't really delve into or maybe overlook. Maybe it sits with procurement, maybe it sits with the risk team, but there is a privacy aspect of that, from data processing agreements to understanding what are the risks that third party is introducing into your privacy program from their lack of compliance, especially if you have jurisdictions like Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, where there are these mandatory registration obligations, right? If you're working with a company that's not registered with the regulator, that introduces a risk to you. So make sure you're looking at what third party privacy risk looks like. Data subject rights. Do you have a program for that? Is it manual? That's fine. Can you automate it? Even better. But do you have someone who is taking in those requests and actually treating them within the time period under law? Data subject notices, privacy policies. That's what that means, data subject notices. But not just on your website, per data subject type. So one for staff, one for third parties, one for your end users or customers. Maybe you could combine some, but typically make sure that you have those notices anywhere you're collecting personal data. Cross-border data transfer, training and awareness, which lends to the privacy culture. So yes, you'll have your probably once a year annual company training, but what other little bits of awareness are you doing? Can you put something on a screensaver? Can you send out flyers, stuff like that? Can you do an incentive program where if anyone does something privacy forward, they get a prize or they get points, things like that? Testing your framework and accountability and privacy impact assessments. So I would say, I know I just said a lot, but I would say look at all of those topics and chip away at them and make sure that's the foundation of your privacy program. So it gives you like a core starting point. These are the things that you're looking at, and you can show progress over time. This is where we started. We had no governance, but now here we are. We have our group of stakeholders, like I can't remember if it was Harrison or Ian that mentioned that working group. That's your governance structure. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but these are the people that are your tag team governance, data privacy compadres. So I think just having that framework written out. You don't have to, Rome wasn't built in a day, but you know, at least these are the priorities of the framework. These are the core pillars, and then you build and expand over time. But that is your minimal privacy framework and program.
Thank you very much, Tolu. Thank you very much for this great compendium. I think before I take you through a quick rapid fire round, I'm just going to read a question from Kayode Abijo. How do leading privacy teams actually measure operational maturity beyond just policies and documentation? Which is a question that I actually much expected. So I would probably like to hear a little bit from you on that. And this time around, maybe we can start with Yan.
Thank you for that question. So, how do you measure maturity beyond that's beyond policies and
Policy.
documentation?
Mhm.
One of the things I would say I look at is uh, the day-to-day activity in an organization. For instance, most organizations you'll have DPO as a single position, which requires you to have more of like influence in different departments. So we are looking at champions who basically communicate communicate back and forth between you and the different departments, and making sure that the department is compliant. Now, maturity level in this case, I'll be looking at when uh, when a product is being launched, or when maybe a new system is being adopted. To what extent is the privacy, basically the privacy channel or the privacy person involved? In this case, I look at a typical organization, the department before launching or before coming up with the idea, there'll be the concept note, which will then be most likely shared with either the champion or directly to the DPO. I'll assume the champion. Uh, Embed the system or the privacy aspect into it, like basically assessing the mapping or anything, look at the gaps before it can go to the next stage of either implementation or inception. Now, considering maybe it's an agile system, then the organization is trained well enough in a way that each team has a well-equipped champion who can make those decisions as they move. So that will be one of the aspects I look at in terms of maturity. The other I look at is uh, level of acceptance of the senior management towards privacy initiatives. Uh, in this case, I find most new organizations, what usually happens is if it's a big organization, then you'll find that they really do not care. You can actually have the budget, but you don't have the support. So when you have an initiative, they'll tell you just do whatever you want, as long as it does not interfere with the day-to-day activities. So a mature organization will have a place where if it is a no, then it comes with a good reasoning, or there is a brainstorm around the initiative before it takes the next stage, and not necessarily brushing off or just accepting as a checkbox. So I'll touch on those two aspects to just measure maturity in a good organization.
Thank you very much, Yan. Harrison, do you want to quickly come in?
Yeah. I think Ian really touched on perhaps what I could also have mentioned. But maybe as a matter of uh, emphasis, I think the leadership aspect has to really come very clear when it comes to maturity as well. If the leadership is now incorporating privacy into the strategy, and when we start talking about strategy and leadership, and then privacy is part of those conversations, then you know that definitely privacy has really matured in the organization. And also something that Ian touched on is the decision making. So whether it's a project which is undergoing approvals, and one of the approvers has to really touch on privacy, then it means that that organization is really maturing and appreciating data privacy as something very important. And something perhaps that I wanted to touch on a bit earlier, when we were trying to answer the previous question, was to say the influence itself, and I'll just tie it back to this current question. The influence that the DPO as a data privacy office would really make more sense if business sees the value out of it, and the value comes from different angles. There was a mention of reputation, and just looking at the monetization piece of it, because we should appreciate that every organization is in business to make money. So if you attach privacy to whatever revenue or savings that the organization is going to make, that conversation will definitely get attention of the leadership. And bringing this conversation even at all levels of the organization would definitely mean the maturity and the literacy around data privacy is getting attention. So that's what I just wanted to add on what Ian just touched on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harrison. Maybe Tolu, before you go in, before you bounce back on that question, I'm just going to add one more I would say one more bridge to that, or one more layer to that question. I think it would be good that as you answer, maybe you tell us, you give us one tool, like a practical tool that you've maybe used. I want to suggest that many Africans, because like me, before going or looking into data protection, I was very much into law as well. So I want to suggest many people are probably facing that difference. So I just want you maybe to mention a specific tool, because you've already mentioned a lot of frameworks, the ISO standards and etc. But what is that specific tool you would actually recommend, a much more practical tool you would recommend that is going to help most of the conversations around operational maturity, the policies and documentation? I don't know. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, an operational tool. I would say don't underestimate the value of social currency. I think it circles back to compliance as a blocker, right? But if you have that social currency with the people who you're trying to pseudo govern or help them reach that level of compliance, it makes those conversations easier. Actually understanding, so we heard about revenue generation, the importance of that, but understanding it in terms of how it matters to those stakeholders will help you help them understand why privacy matters to you. So I would say that's a soft skill that people overlook. And I think a lot of you lawyers are very documentation heavy, very verbose on legalese. But I think if you hone in on that social skill of really meeting people where they are and bringing them into your plans by being part of their plans, it makes conversations a lot easier. I think I would plus one again what both co-panelists said about the hybrid approach. So the horizontal champions, engaging them, and then the top-down support from leadership. Having those two together gives you a very mature level of operational privacy. But I think also we need to look at the privacy team and that function in layers. If you're really operational, you'll have, and maybe it won't sit within the same team, but you can actually outsource this to different departments, having privacy counsel, having privacy operations, having a privacy engineer, having a privacy manager, and then having your DPO. So you have different arms that push and pull in line with certain things. So when you say privacy by design, you can tap into your privacy engineer or your champion within the engineering organization. So if you do want to automate something like data subject rights, or you do want to do data deletion, and trust me, people will say, oh, data deletion, but actually, how many companies have successfully deleted large amounts of data at the retention trigger without breaking something? You need an engineer for that. DPO can't do that. So don't drive yourself crazy trying to solve something that is actually not your job to implement. You tell them what's required under the law, but it's not for you to figure out how to delete data from a core database that could bring down the whole company. So you have to understand that mature operation is not just you. It's not just either the DPO or the privacy manager. It is a concerted effort. And as a non-lawyer, DPAs, it can take me ages to read through. So I outsource that to somebody who is a lawyer and who can read those things. So I would say another way of looking at it is stakeholder reporting. So if you have that leadership, that vertical and that hybrid approach, you need to be reporting to them. So whether it's through a data governance committee or your working group or whatever, have your privacy metrics that you can show them. Have, we received X number of requests, or we had 50% less privacy incidents than the previous quarter, or we had one data breach that we reported in 3 years to a regulator. These are the kind of things that, again, you can get that leadership buy-in. And I promise you'll start trying to do stakeholder reporting and nobody will care. But if you're consistent with it and you can show the metrics, and you can even, maybe your first round will be, we've saved the company X amount in zero non-compliance fines. That's when people sit up and say, oh, actually, what? And then you can prove, this company in our jurisdiction was fined X amount. This company was under investigation. Those kind of things in reporting and metrics show the value and the maturity of your privacy program. And I would just end with a final thing that you can do, that I think a lot of people find it very daunting, but actually you'd be surprised how many regulators want to hear from the private sector. So actually just reaching out to regulators, asking them, how can we support you? We're in this industry. A lot of people are confused. Why don't you reach out and see if you can start a white paper, or gather people in the media industry or the healthcare industry or whatever sector you're in, and collate your pain points in terms of what is not clear under the law. Maybe it's cross-border data transfer. Figure out what's missing and then approach the regulator and ask if you can partner with them or collaborate or do a joint event or what have you. But a lot of people see the regulator as, oh, they might fine us. Yes, they might, but guess what? They also want to hear from the private sector, who is a direct recipient of the law. So whatever laws they're making, they don't necessarily understand how it lands in your industry. So you're the one who's going to help them understand that. And then you create that relationship with them. And I think that's a new level of maturity, when you can actually prove to the board, look, hey, we engaged a regulator on this, or they came to our event, or we're working with them on this, or they're advising us about our binding corporate rules. These are things that makes leadership sit up, because that's good exposure for the company to be engaging with the regulator. So I would say definitely don't be afraid of approaching the regulator, and make sure you have documented metrics to show the progress that you've made. Because when you joined, maybe there was nothing, or there were skeletons, like a skeletal framework, but you need to be able to show the value of the privacy team. And I think that's a really critical part.
Thank you very much, Tolu. I think I am taking down a lot of notes from most of the things you mentioned so fast. And I mean, it's actually great to, it's not every day that we have the opportunity of listening to most of these things. Me myself, I am actually very much benefiting from this conversation, and I would just like to mention that, and maybe Harrison can maybe come up with something around that. I know that DPO Africa has a very interesting course, for example, on operationalizing privacy. And I don't know, maybe it might be an opportunity if you're in this chat. It would be very interesting for you to check it out, and to look up to that. But also, following up on Tolu's point around engagement with regulators, I think it's most of the time a point that is not even considered by many institutions or many people in the private industry. There is sometimes I don't know, it feels like a kind of rebuttal or a tension, which is not supposed to be like there, which is not supposed to be something that is present. But yes, that is also something the DPO Africa Network can be very much useful in addressing and helping. Well, Harrison, I don't know, would you want to add on something, Tolu, and then Yan? That would be the last part.
Yeah, perhaps just to highlight to our listeners some of the things perhaps that would be prioritized, or some of the privacy processes that should not be overlooked, because here we are trying to build a high impact privacy office. And critical to it perhaps would be the understanding of the data before the controls. Once you understand the critical data flows, understanding the stakeholders, understanding the top risks, it should inform your priority. I think from the first question that you did pose during this discussion, it just stems to all that, like what would be your starting point. So prioritizing also in how you are approaching this whole process, and some of the tools perhaps Tolu kind of mentioned. DPIA is one such tool that can just unveil a lot of things, and it can, once you kind of fully understand it, it will make your journey a bit easier, as well as the ROPA that was mentioned at some point. These are critical things that will make the whole journey much easier once you kind of work on them early enough in the journey to compliance. And once they look a little bit cumbersome and tedious at the same time when you are beginning. But once you familiarize yourself with what goes into those documents, and these are really some of the things that the regulators will ask you for when they're enforcing. So they'll ask you for the ROPA. How are you using your data? DPIA, did you carry out some of the assessments? We've gotten some of these things through experience as well, and sharing with the community here is just one way of also ensuring that some of us do not repeat the same things. So these are some of the tools that they are in most of the acts. The act actually, most of the acts, I think, in the Southern Africa region are talking about some of these tools, and they are really some of the tools that the regulator will enforce on. And these are some of the first things that they will ask for when they are doing their audits. So I just wanted to also kind of highlight on that piece. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you very much, Harrison. Yan, over to you.
Maybe more of a parting shot. There are things as a DPO. Most times, the things we've discussed, you'll never be prepared for most of these things. I'll give you an example. Sometime back when I was starting, and you get the appointment, and you think that you are the most important person in the organization. Then you give a simple suggestion which you feel the organization should take serious, like we are updating our privacy policy to align with the country's laws. And you do a very nice document and share with the tech team, and it takes months, and they've never done it. And you feel like you need to, bribe someone for that update to happen. That's when you realize that I think Stolo has talked about it, like the social skills. Like you need to make friends. Just as simple as that. You need to know how to ask for favors. It's not it's not part of your JD. Nobody will tell you about it, but it's very important that you just have to connect with the rest of the team. You might have to go out there and take tea with people, talk to them, let them know you, so that when you come for a favor, it's your job, it's good for the company, but it's still a favor. It's not part of their job. It's not in their sprint. So those are the interesting things. And the one thing that is very important is for a DPO to be very proactive. Find You might have to use unorthodox ways to sometimes nudge the organization to go towards the side that you want, because it's a looming problem. It's going to be catastrophic. It's you to be creative and figure out a way to deliver. So one of the ways which you've mentioned is things like the aspect of privacy by design and default, finding a way to just push maybe you can have a privacy engineer in your team if they'll figure out a way to accept that. If not, find a way to keep engaging with your team in a way that you can more of a transfer the knowledge in an pushy way, and just sometimes make them feel guilty to let you down if they do something without consulting you. So you'll have to find an orthodox way to deliver to your role. So I think those are the things you'll never find in class, you'll not read anywhere. Yeah, but most DPOs will tell you that's what we go through every day. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ian, for this practical insights. Well, I guess we are exactly off time. We are precisely on time at the same time, because we could carry on this conversation like till further. And I feel like such a very much reactive panel will always have something to give out. Well, Tolu, Harrison, Ian, thank you so much for this practical insights. Thank you so much for your time and for communicating and for giving us what you've witnessed firsthand. I mean, you gave us specifics and not just general frameworks, which I think is sometimes what Africans or what people working within the African environment should actually get to be knowing precisely. Thank you, everyone watching. If you're not part of the DPO Africa Network yet, come join us. It's very interesting what is going on around a number of courses which are very much useful. There are a couple of webinars coming and a practitioner training. And there's a real community of people doing this work seriously across the African continent. And that's very important to, one thing at least that I got from this panel generally is cooperation. We need to get to a level of conversations where each and every one of us are very much conversant with conversations around exchanges. And yeah, it's gonna be way much more easier. To see you very soon. Very much.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll just take over for a couple of announcements. Okay, I'm on. Great. So the first announcement will be our Monday meetup. You connect with peers to co-create practical solutions to Africa's most pressing privacy and compliance challenges. This is on the last Monday of every month. I'm just going to drop the link in the chat for people. Then second up would be our policy and practice working group. This is where we meet up as policy and practice working group people. We go through, last we went through a book. This coming term, we're going through templates and tools that DPOs use. And interestingly enough, that's what everyone was talking about today. So we'll be going through doing deep dives into templates, and this is every Thursday at 6 p.m. SAST. Now, the third announcement would be for those interested, there's the book, Data Protection Foundations, A Practical Guide to Privacy, Governance, and Trust by our founder, Amaka Ibeji. This book isn't about theory, it's about practical, actionable guidance. And so a lot of us in the different working groups contributed and were excited to see it published. I'm going to share the link to the book in the chat as well. And lastly, we have DPO DIN, Coaching for Success. This is a coaching experience created for data protection and privacy leaders who want more clarity, confidence, and career momentum. It started this January, and in it you get one-on-one sessions, plus small group sessions in a safe yet powerful space where you can grow, experiment, and be challenged without judgment. If you're ready to reposition yourself, expand your influence, or scale your privacy office this year, this cohort is for you. I'm sharing the link in the chat as well. And if you have questions, they are also available. I'll share the link to the email. And if you'd like to book a session, I'll also share that in the chat. With that, I'll have to say thank you to our presenters, our speakers, and our moderator. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and knowledge. It's been a great webinar. Thank you so much to you all. And to everyone, thank you for joining the webinar, and we hope you did get some knowledge that would be useful for anything you are doing in your privacy journey. With that, I say thank you and have a good evening, morning, afternoon, night. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.